I remember it all too vividly, every horrifying second of it. I was 12. Just a kid, but already too jaded for my age. We'd recently moved into this creaky old house nestled in the frozen belly of rural Missouri. Isolation hung in the air like the frost on the windows. It was a school night, or rather, early morning. The kind of cold that bites right through the walls had settled in, and I woke with a start. It was exactly 5:23 a.m., I remember that glowing red number burning into my memory. My alarm clock, a cheap digital relic with a weak backlight, glared at me from the chipped wooden nightstand beside my bed. I was always a heavy sleeper, the kind that could sleep through thunder or screaming parents. But not that morning. No, something reached in and ripped me from my sleep like it had been waiting for me to drift too deep. The room was nearly barren. We'd only just moved in, so all I had was a squeaky twin bed with faded blue sheets, the nightstand, and a dust-covered bookshelf pushed against the far wall, completely empty, not even a single book to claim it. The silence was louder than anything else, the kind of silence that rings in your ears. At first, I just stared blankly at the clock, barely aware of being awake. But then, there was something else. A chill, not the physical kind, but something ancient and crawling, slid up my spine like an icy centipede. I felt it. Eyes. Something was watching me. Slowly, I turned my head, my breath hitching in my throat. At the foot of my bed, silhouetted by the silver moonlight bleeding through the cracked blinds, was the figure of a child. My little brother? He was about 7 back then. Yeah, it had to be him. Who else would it be? I narrowed my eyes in irritation and sat up slightly, my voice low and sharp. Ethan, what the hell are you doing in my room? Get out. Silence. He didn't move. He just stood there, motionless. That only made me angrier. Ethan, I said again, louder this time, venom dripping from my voice. Don't make me say it again. Still no response, except he stepped forward. Just 1, 2 slow steps, closing the gap between us. My instinct shifted from annoyance to something darker. I leaned forward, ready to grab him by the arm and drag him back to his room. But then he leaned toward me too. Closer. Closer than was natural. And that's when the mask of illusion shattered. It wasn't Ethan. It wasn't anyone I knew. The face, or what should have been a face, was smooth, pale, and empty. No eyes. No nose. No mouth. Nothing but blank white skin that almost glowed in the darkness. It was bald, naked, sexless. A featureless ghost child born of nightmares. Like something scraped straight out of hell's nursery. It reminded me of that internet legend, Dear David, but this thing didn't have a dented skull. It had no damn head shape at all. It was smooth like porcelain left in the kiln too long. A scream tore its way out of me, raw and sharp like shattered glass. It wasn't fear, it was fury. I screamed so violently it felt like my throat ripped open. The thing jerked back as if struck, startled by the sudden noise. It stumbled, its limbs bending wrong as it toppled backward and hit the floor hard. My alarm clock flew off the nightstand from the impact, clattering across the hardwood floor like a dead insect. The thing didn't cry out. It didn't make a sound. Instead, it scuttled back, fast, like a spider. Limbs clicking and jerking with inhuman precision. It threw itself into the corner where the bookshelf stood and curled up there like some lost, broken puppet, tucking its head between its knees as if hiding from my rage. That's when the light came on. The sudden flood of light cut through the shadows like a blade, blinding me momentarily. I blinked hard, squinting at the doorway. My mother, Karen, stood there in her faded pink robe, hair a tangled mess of panic and sleep. Her hand was still on the light switch, her face pinched with confusion and worry. "What happened?" she demanded, stepping into the room. I couldn't answer right away. My body was trembling, my voice caught somewhere between a growl and a sob. I glanced at the bookshelf corner where the thing had hidden, where I had seen it ball itself up like some pale, faceless larva. But now, nothing. Just emptiness. No trace. No shadow. No cold presence. It was like it had never been there at all. Still, the weight of it lingered in the air, like thick fog that hadn't quite lifted. It was here, I managed, my voice rasping. It was right here, in the corner. This thing. It wasn't Ethan. It looked like a kid, but it wasn't. It didn't have a face, Mom, it didn't have a damn face. I gestured wildly at the far end of the room, and then at the alarm clock lying face down in the middle of the floor, far from where it had sat moments before. My breathing was fast and shallow, my skin cold with sweat. Karen's expression flickered, just for a heartbeat, into something else. Not disbelief. Not exactly. It was more like recognition. Fear. But then it vanished, hidden beneath a careful mask. "Honey," she said, stepping forward and kneeling beside my bed, brushing my damp hair from my face. "You were dreaming. You probably had a nightmare and jumped out of bed without realizing it." "No," I growled through clenched teeth. "I was awake. I know the difference." I didn't care how young I was, there was a part of me, deep inside, that wasn't soft like other kids. There was something sharper, something colder. Something that enjoyed the idea of that creature being scared of me. That part knew the truth. I'd seen it. I hadn't imagined that thing, and no dream could have left the alarm clock flung halfway across the room like that. She tried to hush me, shushing like I was a scared toddler, but her hands were trembling. "I'm sleeping in your room," I told her, my voice low and final. It wasn't a request. It was a demand. She didn't argue. She just nodded silently and led me down the hallway, casting one last look back into my room. She thought I didn't notice the way her eyes lingered on the corner by the bookshelf, the place where the faceless thing had curled up like a dying insect. That night, I lay in my mother's bed staring up at the ceiling, wide-eyed and waiting. But nothing came. No noises. No movements. Just the sickly sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. And yet, I could feel it. Somewhere nearby, just out of sight, that thing was still watching me. I refused to go back into that room. Not the next day, or the day after. Not even when my mom insisted I was being ridiculous. It took 2 weeks before she forced me to return, standing in the hallway with crossed arms and that tight-lipped tone only mothers use when they've had enough. "You're 12 years old," she snapped. "It was just a dream. Enough is enough." I didn't argue. I didn't whine. But inside, I hated her for it. For pretending nothing happened. For ignoring the terror that had clawed its way into my bones. I stepped into the room like I was walking into a cage with a lion. It felt colder in there, even with the heater running. The bookshelf still stood empty, mocking me with its silence. Nothing happened that night. Or the next. But the silence was never complete. Over time, the house began to breathe strange life. Footsteps on the stairs when no one was there. Cabinet doors left open that no one touched. Cups shifting across the counter. Bells ringing in rooms no one was in. And soft, playful laughter, children's laughter, echoing faintly through the vents late at night. Ethan heard it too. So did my mom. But no one talked about it. No one wanted to be the first to admit the house was wrong. We weren't alone. We never had been. Years passed, but the house never really let us forget. By the time I was 16, I had grown used to its murmurs. The creaks in the walls, the whisper-like footsteps that would stop just outside my door at night, the tug on the blanket that I'd blame on dreams. But they weren't dreams. Not for me. Not anymore. I had started keeping a knife under my pillow, and I slept facing the door. I learned how to hold my breath when the air turned still, because stillness always came before something moved. I never told my friends. Not because I was scared of sounding crazy. No, I didn't give a damn about that. I didn't tell them because they wouldn't understand. And worse, if they did believe me, they might want to see it. And if they came looking, it might find them instead. Ethan changed too. He used to be loud, always talking, always bouncing off the walls. But after that winter, he got quiet. He avoided my room entirely, even in daylight. Sometimes I'd find him sitting by his window at night, just staring out at the trees behind the house. When I asked what he was doing, he only ever said, listening. And then one night, I heard him whispering back. I never mentioned that to Mom. By the time I hit 23, we were long gone from that place. Karen sold the house and never looked back. She didn't tell the buyers anything. I asked her once, "Did you warn them?" Her response chilled me more than any ghost could. She said, "No. Why should we carry it forever? Let someone else have their turn." It was the first time I realized she might be darker than I ever gave her credit for. Maybe it ran in the family. We moved to a suburban town outside Kansas City. Life moved on, supposedly. But some stains don't wash out, no matter how far you run. And no matter how many locks I turned at night, I never shook the habit of checking the shadows. I still slept with a blade under my pillow. I talked to my mom about it recently. We were sitting in her kitchen, the light humming overhead, and for the first time in over a decade, I brought it up. That night, I said slowly, "The faceless kid. You remember it?" Her spoon stopped stirring her coffee. She didn't look up. "I told you it was a dream," she replied. I smirked, bitter. "Yeah, I remember what you said. But that's not what you felt, is it?" She was quiet for a long time. Then she said something I hadn't expected. "I saw him once, too. Before you did. He stood at the end of my bed one night, just staring. I didn't move. I just waited. I didn't even breathe. When I finally blinked, he was gone. That's when I knew he wasn't for me." Her voice was flat. Not scared. Not emotional. Like she was talking about the weather. "He picked you." I didn't respond. What could I say to that? So yeah, maybe it was a ghost. Maybe just a curious spirit, a lost child without a voice or a name. But if that's true, if it really was a child, then whatever was left of him had turned feral. Hungry. Not for blood or violence, but for attention. For acknowledgement. And I gave it to him. Maybe that was my mistake. Or maybe, deep down, I liked the fear. Maybe some part of me still waits for him. Still watches the dark. Still listens. Even now, when I wake up at odd hours of the night, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, sometimes 5:23 a.m. exactly, I hesitate to turn my head. I resist the urge to look toward the foot of my bed. Because I know one day, when I finally give in and look, he'll be there again. It wasn't over. Not really. Leaving that house didn't end anything. That place, it wasn't haunted. I was. And I think maybe I always had been. The house just woke something up that had been sleeping in me, something I still don't entirely understand. Some nights, I dream of the boy again. Or rather, the thing that wore the shape of a boy. Pale skin like milk, a face smoothed out like wet clay. He never moves in those dreams. Just stands there at the foot of my bed, staring with nothing. His presence doesn't scream or groan like other ghosts. His silence is worse. It infects everything. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my sheets tangled like vines, the sound of my alarm clock frozen at 5:23 a.m., even when it wasn't set. And then one night, it changed. I was in my apartment alone. Ethan had gone off to college, trying to live a normal life, pretending he'd never heard the laughter in the vents or the bells ringing through the walls. Karen still called me once a week, but we never talked about him anymore. We had buried that chapter. But it never buried me. It was just after my 24th birthday. A cold, moonless night. I had fallen asleep on the couch with the TV flickering static. No programs, no sound, just snow and silence. When I woke, it wasn't morning. And the clock on the wall? It read 5:23 a.m. Of course it did. But this time, I didn't freeze. I didn't cry out or panic. I stood up. Quietly. Calmly. Like I'd been waiting for this. I walked to the hallway, and there he was. Standing at the end. Exactly as I remembered, naked, blank, expressionless. But he wasn't alone. There were others. Children. Faceless, pale, and unmoving. They lined the hallway walls like statues. Silent sentinels. I counted 9 of them. Each one smaller than the last. Some crouched. Some stood. All facing me. The leader, the first, the one I'd seen all those years ago, took a step forward. It wasn't threatening. It was familiar. Like we were old friends finally reunited. And I didn't run. I didn't scream. I felt something, ancient, something raw, rising in me. A heat I couldn't explain. I stepped toward him, and the rest parted, letting me pass through the corridor of ghosts like I was one of them. I don't remember what happened after that. When I woke, the sun was rising, bleeding through the blinds. My apartment was quiet. Peaceful. Too peaceful. But I felt different. It was like something had been left inside me, stitched under my skin. The shadows now moved when I walked by. Reflections in mirrors lingered too long. My thoughts, darker than before. And not in a poetic way. I started seeing things. People would flinch around me like they sensed it too. And sometimes, when I'm walking home at night, I hear bare feet padding behind me on the pavement. Small. Childlike. They follow me now. Everywhere. It's not about fear anymore. Fear was just the invitation. Now it's about presence. The connection I made that night, my scream, my fury, my refusal to forget him, it bound us. He isn't the cursed one. I am. And honestly, I don't mind anymore. Because sometimes I catch my reflection smiling when I'm not. And I know that soon, I won't be walking alone. There will be more. More of them. More of me. We're just getting started.